talk about with Sebastian Roche, researcher of politics and policing at France's National Scientific Research Center. Thank you for joining us from Lyon.
Thank you.
First, the anti-hooliganism bill. It's been watered down by MPs already within Emmanuel Macron's own party. Can it work? Can you ban certain individuals who from going to demonstrations the way you can ban them from football stadiums?
Well, that's quite different. To gather and express your opinions is a constitutional right. To go to a football match is not such a right. And the government actually proposes to create an index, a kind of police files of people who are joining this protest with a suspicion that they might be violent. And there is a very thin line between public order on the one hand and a kind of, not a political police would be too strong, but a tendency to curtail the rights of opponents to join protests.
Do you see the Constitutional Council striking this bill down?
I think it will be very difficult to strike it down, because we have seen with the anti-terror laws a number of significant curtailments of individual rights in France. And based on these laws, it's not unlikely that there are further reduction of rights. Therefore, I am not extremely optimistic regarding the role of the Council of State.
You think that they will uphold the anti-riot laws in the end?
They might put some limitations, but I don't think they would oppose it, because it's accepted that in France we have heads of police and we have préfets. Préfets, they are state representatives appointed at the local level, and it's accepted by our lawyers and our courts that these préfets, although they are part of the executive branch of government, they are entitled to give sanction to protesters. So it's accepted that there is not such a clear-cut line between the executive branch and the judicial branch of government in France.
I guess you could say something inherited from the days of Napoleon.
Yes, the structure of France is inherited from the days of Napoleon. Yes, Napoleon invented the préfet. It's something that you wouldn't see in Britain, you wouldn't see in Germany. Yes, this is true. And we have a very centralized police systems. And the Minister of Interior trusts that the police will follow his orders directly. And he has therefore an incentive to give more power to the préfet and more power to the police commissioners, and therefore to restrict the role of the courts in terms of deciding sanctions and protecting human rights.
Sebastian Roche, that brings us back to the issue of how you deal with the unusual levels of violence we've seen on the part of demonstrators, in some cases on the part of police, but certainly very violent demonstrations with the Yellow Vests movement. In neighboring Germany, they have riot police have a policy called de-escalation, a de-escalation policy, where they think long and hard about ways not to provoke demonstrators, which brings us to that topic. Those rubber bullets, they don't use them in Germany. Are they effective, rubber bullets? Are they worth it?
Well, firstly, the rubber bullets, they cause major injuries. I mean, really, you might end up with one eye instead of two eyes. You might lose your hand. And now we have dozens and dozens of people of France that are seriously and permanently injured. So there really is a very high cost. And most democracies the UK, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, the strongest democracies in Europe, they are not keen on using these kinds of weapons. They don't provide authorization for the police to use them during public demonstration. So there is a very high cost. And this police violence has created a counter-violence. It's a strong mobilization. When you get hit in the face, you might have a tendency to retaliate. So I think this dynamics of violence that we have in France goes on both sides, and that's not what police are meant to do.
You sound as though it's the police who started by using these defense ball launchers, these LBDs.
The police in France is one that has the largest number of weapons. If you take into account the number of weapons per country, you find that there is a high number of weapons in France. They used different types of explosive grenades, tear gas, LBDs, and other weapons. And this has not prevented a very high level of violence. There is more than 1,000 police officers wounded, and there are more than 2,000 citizens wounded, including dozens that have lost their eye or their hand or their foot. Therefore, my conclusion is that the French model actually, at this moment, is not very effective, because everybody is suffering it, both police and citizens. When something doesn't work well, I think it's a wise thing to do, to look at it, study it, and try to amend it.
Which brings us to the other issue, one of the new advances in technology, and it's a debate they're having over in the United States, is the increasing use of body cams. And already we're seeing controversies here in France about instances where they're investigating accusations of police abuse. And of course, the body cams haven't recorded that specific moment. What's the future of those body cams on the riot police who record the incidences?
Well, the French Minister of Interior is started by negating the existence of these thousands of citizens that were wounded during the demonstration. But after a while, and after a census of all the most severe cases, he couldn't just show up on TV and say this police violence does not exist. So he started to take it into account. But as the French government doesn't want to abandon the LBD, so he found let's say, a political solution. He said, okay, we will still use a weapon that is dangerous for the public health, but on top of it, we will use cameras. And these cameras, they will help the police to have proof that they did good when they fire their LBDs. But at the moment, it's not what we see. We see that for the latest person that was wounded on last Saturday, despite all these cameras, these body-worn cameras, there is no good footage, and the inspectorate of police hasn't been able to determine how the person was wounded. So it's a technical element, but it's not a broader thinking about the policing strategy, about what you've mentioned, the de-escalation. De-escalation is a global strategy. The cameras, the body-worn cameras, they're just one piece of equipment. And if you want to do better, you need to think about the strategy.
The violence seems to be a strategy for both sides, especially in the era of social media. Sebastian Roche, because of the fact that even if there's, say, one violent incident and you can play it over and over and over again afterwards on television and on social media, is that going to change entirely the strategy when it comes to riot policing?
I don't think, at the moment, I don't think the government can really change the strategy for policing the crowds in France, because they're used to working in a certain way. they're used to having a number of equipments, including these explosive grenades, including these LBDs, and you cannot change everything overnight. So I don't anticipate that any form of violence is going to change the way policing is being carried out in France. However, if the highest administrative court of France decides that LBDs shouldn't be used, well, in that case, the government will have to make dramatic changes in a very short period of time.
Sebastian Roche of the CNRS, the French National Scientific Research Center, thank you so much for joining us from Lyon.
Thank you.